Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to talk trash? Well, not exactly talking trash, but today we're diving into the world of waste management.
Waste management. You might think boring, but trust me.
It gets really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more complex than most people realize.
And to guide our deep dive today, we're using an article from Express Drainage Solutions. They're a Kenyan company, but
Even though the source is Kenyan, this stuff's relevant everywhere, right? I mean, we all produce trash. It's a global challenge.
right, it's like no matter where you live, we're all united by our garbage.
Haha, exactly.
So this article lays out the entire waste life cycle, and get this, there are 8 stages.
8 stages.
I know, right? From the moment you chuck something in the bin to, well, its final destination.
It's quite the journey, and it has huge implications for, like, everything. Our health, the environment, even the economy.
Okay, so let's break it down. Stage 1, pretty obvious, is where waste is generated.
Right, and that waste comes in so many forms. You know, you've got your everyday stuff like food scraps, packaging.
The things we all toss without thinking.
Yeah. But then you also have those specialized wastes, electronics, medical waste, hazardous materials, that kind of thing.
So we've got mountains of trash piling up. What happens next?
Stage 2 is collection. And here come those
Cool.
garbage trucks we all know and maybe not love.
Yeah, but there's more to it than just picking stuff up, right? Like different methods for different types of waste.
Exactly. Like your separate bins for recycling or yard waste. It all depends on what you're tossing and where you live.
Right, right. Makes sense. So trash is collected.
Mm.
Where does it all go?
Well, then it's stage 3 transportation. Got to move all that waste, sometimes pretty far distances, to get it to its next stop.
Like stop being.
Could be a processing facility, a recycling center, that dreaded landfill.
I bet the logistics of that are just mind-boggling. I mean, collecting from millions of households, businesses.
Oh, it's massive. A huge operation.
So the waste is collected, it's transported. What's next in this grand adventure?
Now we get to the really interesting part, stage 4. Separation and sorting.
Like a giant trash puzzle.
Haha, exactly. Materials get categorized into different streams, you know.
So more than just your typical recyclables versus trash.
So way more. You've got organic waste, hazardous waste, construction debris, so many categories.
And I bet technology plays a big role here.
Oh, absolutely. They use magnets to pull out metals, optical sensors to ID different types of plastics.
Wow, getting fancy.
Yeah. Some places even use robots to help with the sorting. It's pretty amazing to see.
Like a high-tech trash symphony, almost. Okay, so once everything's sorted, where does it all end up?
That brings us to stage 5.
Oh.
Treatment and processing. This is where the real magic happens.
Making all that trash disappear.
Well, kinda. It's all about transforming the waste to, reduce its volume, recover valuable materials, lessen the environmental impact.
What kinds of transformations are we talking? Spell it out for us.
So many processes.
Yeah.
Anaerobic digestion, incineration, composting, and of course the old classic, recycling.
Okay, hold on. Anaerobic digestion. That sounds a bit...
It's actually super cool. Microorganisms break down organic waste, like food scraps and yard waste.
And this does what, exactly?
Well, the cool part is it produces biogas.
Biogas. Like what
Yeah,
you can use for fuel.
you got it. It's a perfect example of turning something we think of as waste into a valuable resource.
That's incredible. Okay, what about incineration? I thought that was just, burning trash.
Essentially, yeah. But modern incinerators,
Yeah.
much more sophisticated than you might think. They burn at super high temperatures, shrinking the volume, and, get this, some even generate electricity.
So it's like a power plant running on trash.
In a way, yeah. Of course, there are concerns about air pollution, but these modern ones have all sorts of fancy emission controls to minimize that.
That makes sense. Okay, then there's composting. That seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it is. And it's amazing for recycling organic waste. It's basically nature's recycling system, right? Turning scraps and yard waste into, like, super nutrient-rich compost.
I've heard of people composting at home. Is that something anyone can do?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's easier than you'd think, and a great way to be a bit greener, too.
Awesome. Okay, we've had anaerobic digestion, incineration, composting. Now let's talk recycling. That seems like the most obvious way to handle waste.
Oh, it's definitely key. But here's the thing. Recycling only works if it's done right.
Right. Like,
Contamination's a big problem. Got to make sure those recyclables are clean and sorted properly.
I've definitely messed up my recycling before. Putting things in the wrong bin, all that.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
It's a learning curve. The more we understand about recycling, the better we'll get at it.
Makes sense. So we've covered all these treatment and processing methods, but What about the waste that can't be recycled or composted? Where does that go?
Ah, yes. That brings us to stage 6, disposal. And the most common method, landfilling.
The landfill. I always picture it as just this like giant hole in the ground overflowing with garbage.
It's a bit more than that, thankfully. Modern landfills are designed to, minimize the impact on the environment. They have liners to prevent leakage, systems to collect and treat something called leachate.
Hold on, leachate.
Yeah, it's the liquid that forms as waste decomposes. Nasty stuff can be really harmful if it leaks out. Landfills also have these gas collection systems to capture methane, which is, well, it's a potent greenhouse gas, but
Right.
it can be used as an energy source too.
Wow, I had no idea landfills were so high tech. So even in disposal, there's a focus on protecting the environment.
Exactly. It shows how much we've learned about doing this waste management thing responsibly. But even better than managing waste,
Yeah.
preventing it altogether. Which brings us to stage 7.
Prevention and reduction. I like the sound of that.
Right. This stage is all about making choices that minimize waste in the first place. And that's where you, dear listener, come in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What can we do to, prevent all this waste from happening in the first place?
Lots of simple things. It starts with being aware. Pay attention to what you're using, what you're tossing out. And then think about those choices you're making about, well, everything you buy and consume.
Like thinking twice before you buy something new.
Exactly. Do you really need it? Could you borrow it? Maybe find a used version? Asking those questions can make a big difference.
That makes total sense. And of course, there's the classic reduce, reuse, recycle thing. But how can we actually, you know, make those actions more than just a slogan?
Well, reusing stuff is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, extend the lifespan of what you already have.
Yeah.
Get creative with it. Turn old jars into storage containers. Use old clothes as rags. Tons of possibilities.
I love that. Give those things a second life, right? And recycling, yeah, that's crucial. But honestly, I still get confused about what can and can't be recycled.
Yeah, it's tricky. Rules can change depending on where you live, so best to check your local guidelines. But generally, make sure your recyclables are clean, emptied, no food residue.
Got it. So we've covered 7 stages now, from like trash creation to disposal and even prevention. Anything else?
Ah, yes. Stage 8, the
Yeah.
final stage, monitoring and regulation.
That sounds important.
Oh, it is. This is all about, inspections, making sure regulations are followed, keeping an eye on the environmental impact of all this waste management stuff, make sure things are running smoothly, and that we're always trying to improve.
Wow, so we've really gone through the whole waste cycle here, from our bins to, well, wherever it all ends up. I never realized how much was going on behind the scenes.
It's complex, but totally vital. And you know what? We've only scratched the surface. Next time, we'll dive into why waste management matters so much. It's not just about keeping our streets clean. It touches everything. Stay tuned. It gets really interesting.
Back again for more deep dive. We just explored those 8 stages of waste management, like from the moment something becomes trash to, its final resting place. But why should we even care? It's just garbage, right?
Oh, it's so much more than that. Waste management has this huge impact on uh, public health, safety, even the economy. It's all connected.
Yeah, the article we're looking at, it specifically mentions how waste management helps prevent diseases. And I get that, like piles of trash attract pests and spread germs.
Right, but it goes way beyond that.
Does it?
Think about it. If waste isn't managed properly, it can, contaminate water sources.
Ugh.
Yeah, and that can lead to outbreaks of diseases, like cholera, for example.
Oh, wow. I never even, yeah, okay. That's serious.
And it can also create these perfect breeding grounds for mosquitoes and rodents, the ones that spread diseases.
So basically, good waste management is like disease prevention on a massive scale.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But the article also talks about the economic advantages, which I gotta admit, I found kind of surprising. How does managing trash actually boost the economy?
It might seem a bit weird, but
Mhm.
there are actually a ton of economic benefits to doing this right. For one, it creates jobs.
Oh, right. I hadn't thought of that.
Think about all the people involved in, collecting the waste, sorting it, processing it, recycling it.
Yeah, it's a whole industry.
It is. And then there's the potential for something called resource recovery.
Resource recovery.
It basically means recycling stuff like paper, plastic, metals that saves money because we don't have to extract as many virgin resources,
Right.
right? So it's good for the economy and good for the environment.
It's like turning trash into treasure, literally. The article also mentioned these things called waste-to-energy technologies. What are those all about?
Those were really cool. Instead of just burying or burning waste, you can use it to actually generate electricity or heat.
What?
Yeah, it's a way to, rely less on fossil fuels and move towards a more sustainable energy system.
So you're saying my old banana peels could help power my house?
Well, it's not quite that simple,
Okay, fine.
but you get the idea. Organic waste can be broken down in a process called anaerobic digestion,
Yeah.
and that creates biogas.
Right, we talked about that before. And that
Yeah.
biogas can be used as fuel.
Got it?
That is mind-blowing. Okay, so we've talked about the health benefits, the economic benefits,
Yeah.
but I'm also curious about the stuff involved in all this.
Yeah.
What kind of materials are we talking about here?
Oh, it's super diverse. I mean, you have your basic stuff, trash bags, recycling bins,
The essentials.
but then you get into the more specialized equipment, like those giant trucks with the mechanical arms for picking up bins, the conveyor belts for sorting. Some places even use those high-tech optical sensors that can identify different types of materials.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really a mix of like low-tech and high-tech solutions all working together. And the specific materials they use can vary a lot depending on the type of waste, the local infrastructure.
Right, right.
For example, in some countries, they might use like simple hand carts to collect waste, while in others, they might have these totally automated systems that use robots to do the sorting.
I'm picturing those anaerobic digesters we talked about before. Those have got to be pretty complex.
Oh, they are. But they're a great example of how technology can help us, turn waste into something useful.
It's amazing. What about composting facilities? I've always wanted to see one of those in action.
They're pretty interesting. They range from like little backyard compost bins to huge industrial scale operations. It's really cool to see how they can transform food scraps and yard waste into that super rich compost.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got all this equipment and technology working hard to manage our waste, but how do we know it's all being done, safely and responsibly?
That's where monitoring and regulation come in. It's the final stage of the whole waste management cycle.
Right.
And it's crucial for making sure everything's running properly, that we're meeting environmental standards.
So it's like a system of checks and balances.
Exactly. There are these agencies and organizations that do inspections, monitor emissions, enforce regulations,
Yeah.
all to protect public health and the environment. They're kind of like the watchdogs of waste management, making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Love that. Makes me feel better knowing someone's keeping an eye on things. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the nitty-gritty details of how waste is managed to the bigger picture stuff, health, the economy, the environment. But what about us? What can we as individuals do to make a difference in all of this? It feels kind of overwhelming, honestly.
I totally get it. It can feel like a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
But the good news is that even small actions can have a big impact when, millions of people are doing them.
Okay, so what are some things we can actually do? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, one of the most effective things is actually pretty simple. Reduce your consumption. Before you buy something, ask yourself, do I really need this? Could you borrow it instead? Buy it secondhand.
Right, being more mindful about what we buy.
Exactly. And thinking about the whole life cycle of a product. Like,
Yeah.
where did it come from? What happens to it when I'm done with it?
It's a good point. I know I'm totally guilty of impulse buys sometimes. Things I don't even really need. And then they just end up cluttering up my house.
Happens to the best of us. But yeah, if we can shift our mindset and focus on needs over wants, we can make a huge difference in the amount of stuff that ends up as waste.
Makes sense. And then, of course, there's that whole reduce, reuse, recycle thing. But how can we actually put those principles into action?
Reusing stuff is huge. It keeps things out of the landfill, and it can be fun too. Get creative. Use old jars to store food. Turn old clothes into rags. There are tons of possibilities.
It's like giving things a second life.
Exactly.
And then there's recycling. Super important. But honestly, I still get confused sometimes about what can and can't be recycled.
Yeah, it can be tricky. Best thing to do is check your local guidelines because, programs can vary from place to place. But in general, just make sure those recyclables are clean, empty, no food residue. And if you're ever not sure, toss it in the trash. Better to be safe than sorry, and you don't want to contaminate the whole recycling stream.
Good point. Okay, so reduce, reuse, recycle. Got it. But I'm also curious about composting. I've heard so much about it, and it seems like a good way to handle food waste, but it also seems kind of intimidating.
It's easier than you think. It's like, having a little natural recycling system right in your backyard, breaking down those food scraps and yard waste. And you don't need a ton of space to do it. There are all kinds of composting systems out there, some even designed for small spaces.
Okay, you're convincing me. I might have to give it a try. But besides all these like individual actions, is there anything we can do to push for change on a bigger level? You know, waste management feels like such a big systemic issue.
You're right. It's not just about what we do at home. Our voices matter too. We can support policies that, encourage waste reduction, recycling, sustainable waste management practices. And we can choose to support businesses that are doing things the right way.
Right. So it's about using our wallets and our voices to like create a demand for more sustainable practices.
Exactly. And every time you have a conversation about this stuff, you're raising awareness, encouraging other people to think about it. It all adds up.
Love that. This has been so eye-opening. We started talking about trash, but it's really about so much more than that. It's about our health, the environment, the economy. It's about taking responsibility for our planet.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's amazing how interconnected it all is, right?
It really is.
Okay.
Okay, so we've unpacked this whole world of waste management, and I'm feeling, honestly, a little inspired to make a change.
That's the spirit. And remember, it's not just about what you do on your own. We need everyone working together, consumers, businesses, policymakers, to create a more sustainable future.
So true. Okay, I think we've thoroughly explored the ins and outs of waste management. Any final thoughts before we move on? Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone deep, right? Explored the whole waste management system from those overflowing bins to like high-tech sorting facilities, even those surprisingly sophisticated landfills. But now it's all about you. What can you actually do to make a dent in this global trash problem?
That's the thing, it's empowering. Waste management, it might seem huge, overwhelming, but honestly, your choices matter. Like every piece of trash you don't create, that's a win.
The article we've been digging into, it's got this whole section on waste prevention, and I gotta say, that's my favorite part. Always better to avoid creating the waste in the first place, right?
100%. And the best part, most of these prevention strategies, they're super simple changes you can make in your daily life. It starts with just being a bit more aware. Pay attention to what you're using, what you're tossing, where it all ends up.
But, like actually looking in my trash can before I take it out, not just mindlessly tossing it.
Exactly. It's like a little waste audit, right?
Yeah.
You get a sense of your own habits.
Yeah.
And then you can target like specific areas where you can improve.
Okay, I'm ready to get my hands dirty. Give me those actionable tips. What can I start doing today to reduce my trash footprint?
One of the simplest, the most powerful things. Reduce your consumption. Just buy less stuff. It's like before you buy anything new, just pause. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Could I borrow it from a friend? Maybe find it used.
I know I'm so bad with impulse buys. You know, things I use once and then they just clutter up my place.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But when you shift your thinking, focus on what you need, not just what you want in the moment, it really cuts down on the stuff that ends up, as waste.
Makes sense. And then, of course, there's the whole reduce, reuse, recycle thing.
Mhm.
But how do we make those actions more than just like a catchy slogan? How do we really live by them?
Reusing things is huge. Like, extend the life of what you already have. Get creative with it. Old jars. Turn them into storage containers. Worn out clothes. Make them into rags. Even something as simple as using reusable shopping bags instead of those flimsy plastic ones. It all adds up.
I love that. It's like those things get a whole second life. And speaking of second chances, recycling, that's still key, right? But I gotta admit, I sometimes get confused about what goes in the recycling bin and what doesn't.
It's true. Recycling rules can be a little different depending on where you live. Always good to check your local guidelines. But in general, just make sure your recyclables are clean, empty, no food scraps stuck to them. And if you're ever not sure, just toss it in the trash. Better to be safe than sorry, right? You don't want to mess up the whole recycling process with the wrong stuff.
Right, right. Better safe than sorry. Now, the article also mentioned composting, and I have to be honest, it seems a little intimidating to me, but I've heard it's a great way to like deal with food waste. Is that something anyone can do?
Composting's not as hard as you might think. It's like having this little mini ecosystem in your backyard,
Yeah.
breaking down those food scraps and turning them into this amazing, nutrient-rich soil. And you don't need tons of space. They have these small composting systems that can fit on a balcony even.
Okay, you're making me want to try it. But besides all these things we can do at home, on our own, is there anything we can do to push for change on a bigger scale?
Hmm.
Because waste management, it feels like such a huge systemic problem.
You're right. It's not just about individual actions. It's bigger than that. But that's where our voices come in. We can support policies that, encourage less waste, more recycling, more sustainable ways of managing it all. We can also choose to support businesses that are, doing things the right way.
So it's like using our money and our voices to make a difference. Demand better practices, basically.
Exactly. And even just talking about this stuff with your friends, family, that raises awareness, gets people thinking. It all adds up.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. I mean, we started talking about trash, but we've ended up discussing something way bigger. It's about, like, our health, the environment, the economy. It's about how we treat our planet.
I couldn't agree more. It's amazing how it's all connected, right?
It really is. So as we wrap this up, any final thoughts to leave our listeners with?
It's great that we've gotten so good at managing waste. But what if we put that same energy, that same ingenuity into the stuff we make in the first place?
That's a great point. What if everything was designed to be, like, circular, less waste from the very beginning?
Exactly. Imagine a world where waste isn't seen as a problem, but as a resource.
That's a future worth fighting for. And it starts with all of us, right?
Mm,
Making conscious choices, speaking up, pushing for change. It all makes a difference.
couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of waste management. We hope you learned something new and feel inspired to take action.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making the world a little bit better, one piece of trash at a time.